Protein, everything the body needs.
You eat when you want, what you want, and how you want.
Protein pizza burrito time. We got Dr. Ted Naiman and Marty Kendall in the house. Dr. Ted Naiman is the co-author of the Protein Energy Diet book. His research and medical practices are focused on the optimal implementation of diet and exercise. And then we have Marty, who's an engineer to optimize nutrition using data-driven approach, whose dream is to end the animal versus plant battles by simply focusing on nutrient-dense diet.
Pretty much.
I'm so grateful to have you here. Join me today because it's kind of your two approaches that really align with satiety, which I think is not discussed enough in these diet wars that we see every day. And so I thought, what better to have you both join us in talking about it on this satiating Saturday or Sunday for those down under.
Yeah, we're from the future. Definitely an important topic, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's get right to it with protein. This is a topic that has become more popular in the recent years, which it should be, I think. But protein, a lot of people fear it. There's a lot of misconceptions on, is too much protein going to hurt you? Is it bad for your kidneys? Can you eat an unlimited amount of protein? What's the scoop and why? Ted, I'm going to direct this to you since you're the protein king. Why is it so vital when we're talking about satiety, let alone optimal health?
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So I think all three of us here, our number one strategy is improving satiety per calorie. It's basically getting higher satiety while you're eating fewer calories. I'm the macro guy, protein. Marty's the micro guy. And Callie, you're the energy density guy, basically, with your high volume eating. You're trying to eat the highest amount of weight and volume of food for the fewest calories. So, and honestly, those are probably the three biggest rocks in the jar. It's like protein, micros, energy density, maybe fiber is in there somewhere. And that's basically how you maximize satiety per calorie. So it's really interesting that it's this satiety per calorie triangle that we're all looking at it from different sides. I definitely come at it from a protein point of view. And the reason I do that is because the real enemy for all three of us is refined carbs and refined fats. You dump in refined carbs and refined fats, basically sugar and oil, and you dilute out everything. You dilute out energy density, you dilute out micronutrients, you dilute out macronutrients. And I picked protein because to me it feels like one of the bigger rocks in the jar. It's like easy for people to focus on this one thing, just protein percentage of your diet. And if you look at the medical literature and you look at humans or animals eating ad lib calories, meaning you just eat as much as you want, probably the single most important metric for ad lib diet and energy intake is protein percentage. Boom, that's it. That's probably the single biggest factor. And so I'm really scrutinizing that, especially since you can pretty clearly graph out how the protein percent of human diet just steadily went downhill. I mean, we went from, 30% in the Paleolithic down to, 20% with agriculture, down to 10% with the Industrial Revolution. And we've just steadily gotten worse and worse body composition. And as the protein energy ratio of our diet went down, the protein energy ratio of our bodies went down because we just got fatter and fatter and fatter. So I love focusing on protein as kind of a step one. It's like step one, center everything around protein. Protein is focus of every meal. Protein is focus of every snack. And I think if you get that locked in place, then you can really spend a lot more time, fine tuning it with energy density and fiber and micronutrients and everything. But protein just feels kind of primary for me. And in fact, that's where we get the word protein from. So that's probably the most important macro. The other thing for me is that if you look at what humans need to eat every day, your need for carbs is 0, right? Okay, nobody ever has to eat any carb. The amount of essential fatty acids you need is, maybe under 10 grams. I mean, it's really pretty small, but you absolutely have to have protein every day. You got this huge absolute need for protein. I mean, you're losing millions of cells in your body every day from your skin and your GI tract and everywhere, and you have to replace all these, and you have to build them out of stuff. Like, your body is mostly protein. If you remove the water from your body, the dry weight of humans is mostly protein, or it should be, unless you're morbidly obese and it's fat. And so, you're literally physically losing protein every day, and you physically have to replace it. And it is the macronutrient that you have to eat every day. Basically, that is the number one thing that everybody should be focusing on, in my opinion. But all of those angles are important, but it just feels like kind of a foundation to me.
Oh yeah, totally. Protein from our analysis is definitely central, and Ted's a big fan of the protein leverage hypothesis by Simpson and Rabenheimer, and their work is amazing in terms of showing that protein is central, and we all eat enough. We eat until we get enough protein, but it's not just the protein; it's all the micronutrients, it's all the nutrients. We need all these nutrients to thrive, and we see the same sort of satiety response for all the micronutrients across the board. But at the same time, we're programmed to get enough energy. We get this dopamine response to get the energy we need from food. So we just keep on, our food system has been geared to drive a fat, carb, hyper dopamine response that never occurred in nature. So we just keep on eating and eating and eating. Like Ted inferred, our food system has been set up for profit, for whatever, to make us eat more of these foods. So it's stacked against us. So in this environment, we need to find a way to reverse engineer that, to get, not go from 10% to 60% protein, because everybody goes, I'm so hungry, I can't eat this way. It's just, even Simpson and Rabenheimer talk about dialing up the protein percentage. If you're at 10, let's go to 15. If you're 15 and you're not getting results, let's go to 20, and keep on ramping that up and ratcheting it up until you get the results you want. And then when you get the results you want, you can then dial back in the energy from fat and carbs.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to confess, before ever seeing any of your work, which I'm sure a lot of regular Joes like me can relate, I didn't know what satiety was. I didn't know the importance of protein. My story, started minding nutrition, came from an autoimmune response that I just needed to change my diet. And satiety and nutrient density kind of found me by simply removing refined sugars, high starch foods. And yeah, I noticed that I could, from a high volume perspective, pack tons of food on my plate when really all I'm eating is meat and green veggies. And by doing so, I'm also getting a solid foundation of nutrients, feeling great. And it was way too easy to drop body fat by doing that.
And protein and nutrients always go hand in hand. If you're chasing nutrients, you're getting protein. If you're chasing protein, for the most part, you're getting nutrients. And like getting fine-tuning those final nutrients that you might be struggling to get on a egg white and protein powder diet is just sort of the icing on the cake to fine-tune it from there. So yeah, protein is definitely essential, and everything else is just fine-tuning around the edges and further optimizing.
So what actually happens? Maybe we haven't even really distinguished what satiety really is.
Yeah.
And I guess it would just be, the opposite of whatever drives hunger. So what is, having a deficient protein diet? How does that actually drive hunger versus having an adequate protein diet?
Ted?
Well, humans have a specific appetite for basically 5 things: fat, protein, carbs, and then minerals, of which calcium and sodium seem to be the most studied. So you're basically eating until you get enough of these things. And it feels like protein is the most dramatic one in the medical literature. But to be honest, there's not enough studies on satiety. If you look at for studies in the medical literature on fat content in satiety or fiber in satiety and all these different factors. The number of studies is tiny. It's really honestly underexplored in medical literature. And then there's huge confounders. It's so hard to do these studies because it's hard to blind them. And then it's hard to match calories, and it's hard to match energy density, and it's hard to match micros. And every time you change one thing, you change everything else. And so it's horribly enmeshed, and you really can't just like isolate one thing. And so we basically don't know crap about what actually causes satiety. The only things we know for sure is that energy density is a big deal. Protein percent's a big deal. Certain minerals seem to be a big deal. And fiber is kind of possibly important, but you can't really separate that from energy density. So these are really kind of the only things we know about. And we're basically in the dark ages on exactly what drives satiety. And I think that's why there's so much confusion out there, and that's why nobody knows what the hell they're supposed to eat.
Yeah, it's a massive conundrum that, but in the end, getting the nutrients you need without too much energy is sort of the fundamental question. And then, like Ted says, everybody eats until they're full. Nobody goes, oh yeah, I'm tracking and I'm still really hungry. Eventually, that tracking, that restriction fails because your body just craves the energy, unless you're a stage bodybuilder who can get to a certain point, but then they usually rebound binge. So you need to find a way that you can eat that you can maintain, that leaves you satiated, leaves you full. And satiety is just, the food that creates, that leaves you not feeling hungry over the long term after that meal, after the day. And it's just, that's the critical element, is what food drives overeating and what foods allow you to not overeat and not be consumed with food forever, and just find a sustainable point that you can enjoy. And getting more nutrients per calorie, we just see in our analysis and the master classes and everything, just always helps people that once they focus on getting the nutrients they need from their food, they go, I'm no longer hungry. This is crazy. And I don't have to control and restrict, and all that mental anguish of trying to eat less all the time is just gone, because once you give your body the food it needs, it goes, okay, I'm satisfied. Yeah, maybe I need a bit more energy from fat and carbs later, and that's definitely a thing. You definitely need the energy, but making sure you get the nutrients first up just leaves you in a much better place to make an intelligent decision later, rather than being face down the donuts or whatever it is that you just can't stop eating.
Yeah, I think you hit a few points there, that not only is it that like during, like while you're eating, do you feel satiated, but even between meals, getting that heavy dose of nutrients allows you to not be hungry for a longer stretch of time to your next meal. This avoids snacking. This encourages better preparation of creating more nourishing meals throughout your day. And speaking of meals throughout the day, a pretty popular topic that a lot of people seem to want to talk about today was macronutrient timing, specifically carbs. Ted, I know that you advocate for carbs to be eaten later in the day. Why would you say that is? What benefits come with that? And is there any other macronutrient that should have the timing like carbs could?
Gotcha. Okay, so for me, fat is the one that's probably timing's the least important, because it's so slowly digested. I mean, it takes 12 hours for fat to, it has to slowly go through the wall of your small intestine, get packaged into chylomicrons, go through your lymphatics, end up in your liver, get repackaged, go to your fat cells. The whole time it's super passive. It's in the background. It's not changing anything about your body state or your metabolism, and it just slowly ends up in your fat cells. Fat is like the one that you need to worry about the timing the very least. It's like really not that helpful. Nobody's getting a whole lot of acute satiety from it. I mean, it's got the least weight and volume in your stomach anyway, so you're not getting a lot of energy density satiety. It's not helping your performance. It's not an ergogenic. Fat's the one that you don't have to time as much. I mean, the only thing with fat that I worry about is combining a high energy density carb with a high energy density fat together, because that's probably going to drive overeating. So like my only thought is just don't mix it with your carbs necessarily, and try to keep the energy density as low as you can. Like instead of eating oil, which is 100 grams of fat per 100 grams, eat an avocado, which is 10 grams of fat per 100 grams, way better energy density scenario. So with me, carbs are more like a drug, because carbs will actually change your whole metabolism transiently. You'll actually change from fat oxidation to carb oxidation, and you're getting this major switch. And that can trigger more of a parasympathetic state. So some people might want to use it for more of a rest and digest mode in the evening, which is what I'm doing with it. You also might want to eat carbs around exercise, right before, right during, or right after exercise, for a couple of reasons. Right before you exercise, it might be an ergogenic. Some people perform better with carbs. During exercise, if you're doing some super hard cardio for more than an hour, you probably going to want to eat carbs during the event, because otherwise you could bonk. You know what I mean? I don't care how fat adapted you are. If you're running a marathon and you run for 2 hours, you're going to want intra-race carbs for sure. And then right after you exercise, you've depleted so much energy from your muscles that the insulin sensitivity of your muscles is way, way higher. So eating carbs right before your workout, right during your workout, or right after your workout is a really good placement for performance, for macro partitioning. You're going to get more going into muscle and less going into fat. A lot of reasons why you might want to do that. I kind of don't like carbs first thing in the morning, because I feel like that sets me up for this glycemic roller coaster, where if I eat just a ton of carbs, I might actually feel the glycemic fall 3 or 4 hours later and get a little bit hypoglycemic. And we have studies showing that postprandial, mid to late postprandial energy intake goes up if people can feel this glucose excursion. You know what I mean? So for me, carbs first thing in the morning, not that great. Carbs around my workouts, really good, before, during, or after, and then maybe in the evening to try to trigger more of this parasympathetic rest and digest mode. So I'm using my carbs really strategically, centered around exercise, or backloading them in the evening, personally.
Yeah, a lot of people wake up with elevated blood sugars, sort of dawn phenomenon effect. And with data-driven fasting, when they sort of prioritize protein at that first meal, it sort of not only smashes hunger, but with a higher protein percentage, their blood sugars plummet from there, and then they can eat another meal, and maybe that later on in the day, the blood sugars are low, and then they can add a little bit of carbs if they're potentially hungry. But if they're really hungry, if they're trying to lose body fat, it's probably going to be better to dose with some carbs that'll raise your blood sugar up, and you're not going to feel as hungry, because like you said, if you drop really low, you're going to be really hungry and motivated to eat anything and everything. But if your blood sugars come back up a little bit to normal levels before you go to bed, you're not going to be insanely hungry. And yeah, definitely better to prioritize high carb, lower fat at that point, so you just satiated. It's, as long as you stay on one extreme, like greater than 60% carbs or less than 30% carbs, your satiety works itself out. But if you're in that middle danger zone of carb plus fat, you just keep on eating. So that's what we're trying to manage.
The best time to eat protein is at all those eating times, because you're trying to get recomp where you get the highest lean mass at the lowest fat mass. And so the first meal of the day, you want a lot of protein so you can get like an anabolic response, save muscle, maybe build muscle. And then the last meal of the day, protein also, because you're trying to just maximize muscle hypertrophy and anabolism. So it's like protein, but then you kind of separate out those carbs and fats.
Yeah, definitely.
We're talking about timing, and you brought up, carbs around exercise. Marty, you've done a lot of data. You have a lot of data based around satiety. Is there anything where exercise plays a role in satiety? Someone that has a more sedentary life versus very active life. Is there any satiety response dependent on that?
Yeah, I think one thing you need to look at is staying out of that gray zone of the intermediate exercise. Like Ted says, you either need to be really high intensity resistance training, get it done, get it over with, or just moving around gently. And the low intensity exercise will sort of use predominantly fat. The high intensity might just give you a burst of blood sugars and you'll build muscle, but it's that gray zone that seems to sort of cause that blood sugar fluctuation that leaves you in a sort of hunger zone. And a lot of people have found just walking more and being more active helps immensely with hunger and dropping blood sugars and just being able to regulate the appetite when they go to eat again, because they're not in that, I've exercised a bit and I'm really hungry, so I'm going to eat anything and everything. So yeah, it leaves you in a better place to make better food choices at that point.
We have some studies. There are two general categories of studies on exercise and satiety. Number one, high intensity exercise has been proven to acutely reduce hunger. So like if you do, 50 jump squats right now, first of all, you'll feel like you're about to die, but you'll acutely be quite a bit less hungry, and that effect lasts for up to 2 hours. And it's because you flood your bloodstream with glucose and all these fuels. Your liver just like wrings out a bunch of energy just from the epinephrine. And you're super not hungry. Like literally try this. I encourage everyone to try this. If you're hungry, do 100 burpees or some just insane blast of it. Just jump rope for 5 minutes, and then pay attention to how hungry you are. And it's bizarre. Like we've all experienced this. And if you haven't, you need to try it for yourself. The other thing we found is that just doing more cardio in general puts people in better touch with hunger and fullness. You have a lot better sensation of hunger and you manage it a lot better, and you eat more appropriately too. So exercise is huge for hunger and satiety, in my opinion.
Definitely better to be active and eating more, so you're sort of managing on a higher calorie level overall, because if you have to wind it down to 500 calories a day to lose weight because you're really sedentary, it's really impossible to stay there in the long term. It's much better to be active and moving, so you're able to have a higher energy flux. And at that point, it seems to be people are able to regulate the satiety a lot better.
Absolutely. Yeah, your body wants this high energy throughput and to maintain the same flux. So you're eating a lot of calories and burning a lot of calories. And when you're really overweight, you burn a lot more calories just walking around and also just being larger. And then as you lose weight, you have to replace that energy expenditure with exercise in order to maintain weight loss. So exercise is crucial for weight loss maintenance, because you've got to burn the same amount of energy you did when you were fatter. And the only way to do that is to increase your step count, your general activity, or maybe just more cardio or whatever. And ideally keep, maintaining all the muscle mass you can, or even building more, so your basal metabolic rate stays as high as possible. So yeah, exercise is huge, big deal.
Definitely.
Let's do like a couple more questions, and maybe we can open up the floor a bit. Should satiety per calorie be the goal, or should we focus more solely on nutrient density when we're talking about sustaining healthy diet?
I think they're both the same thing.
Same thing. That was easy. Next.
Ted's just dumbed it down to the biggest lever and the simplest, most effective tool to focus on protein to energy, and it's just blown up because people can understand it. But yeah, once you get the protein you need, you're probably going to be getting all the nutrients you need and satiety you need, and yeah, just the micronutrient fine tuning is just the icing on the cake from there.
It's so true. The two rule system: hit protein, hit calories. And yeah, I would agree that protein should be the primary focus even before calories.
Yeah.
For the reason of, like we just talked about, getting the foundation and nutrients and whatever. But yeah, Ted, I can't thank you enough for kind of just painting it so brilliantly and so easy without any dogma or whatever fixed approach you want to go by. Protein and energy just seems to be the champion in terms of defining a nutrient dense, finding satiety, and in a sustainable way.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, man. I mean, I hopefully it's the most important single metric, at least, and it's not everything, but it's a big one.
Especially if it's from whole foods, if you're getting a protein from some, collagen processed gunk, at that point it doesn't work. But if you're getting it from whole foods that look like they grew in nature recently, you're going to be smashing the micronutrients.
So do you want to open the floor? Does anybody have any questions?
Maybe people can drop them in the chat, but one for Ted is where people mostly go wrong with misunderstanding the protein to energy ratio, because they just eat more protein and they go, I'm getting fatter. What's up with that? Is it about eating more protein or protein percentage?
It's definitely about protein percentage. So if you just take your existing diet and just sprinkle whey powder all over it and dump in a couple of 100 grams of extra protein, you're going nowhere, right? Yeah. Like you're probably not going to work. It's eating foods that are higher protein percentage, exactly. Okay. And it really ends up honestly like just choosing leaner proteins, you know what I mean? Go from like bacon to turkey bacon, go from the fattest ribeye you can find to sirloin, go from the 80-20 ground beef to the 90-10 or something. But honestly, the number one biggest mistake I see people making is everyone gets so extreme with it. It's like, oh wait, protein's good, carbs and fat are bad. My whole diet's egg whites now. That's all I eat. It's just whey powder and egg whites. And that you can't do that. It's it's such a U-shaped curve. So you have to take where you're at and just incrementally increase it in a sustainable way where you're eating maybe 300 calories less from carbs and fats. And you have to enjoy it. It has to be sustainable. It has to be realistic. You have to be able to eat that way forever. And so I'm like, okay, try to go from 10% protein to 25 or, something human instead of like 100%. And that's probably the biggest problem I see.
Yeah, because when you just eat and people go, oh, I'm getting all my protein from bacon or butter. It's like, no, it's protein percentage. If you just eat more protein, a lot of the time that comes with more fat. What about subjective satiety? What are your thoughts on that? Can you really, I ate 3 bulletproof coffees and I'm really full. That fat's the most satiating nutrient. That's what
it's a total disaster. The problem is nobody in the low carbosphere has any clue how many grams of fat they're eating. So they're like, well, you're stupid. You know how much satiety I get from like eating a whole stick of butter? I'm not hungry the rest of the whole day. That's crazy stuff. Yeah, but it was 10,000 calories. So I think it's the satiety per calorie that people are missing out on. And like refined fat is the worst for that. It's so easy to overeat refined fat and then you have no clue how much you ate. And sure, you have plenty of satiety, but like I would have satiety if I just ate a dozen donuts, but it's like 10,000 calories. So that's, I think, another huge problem is like, track your macros and actually pay attention to how many grams of fat you eat. My low carb patients, their minds are blown with exactly how many grams of fat they're eating. They have no idea. They literally don't know. They're like, oh my God, I'm eating, 150 grams of fat. And you're eating 70 grams of fat. Oh, okay. That's different. So like, I think that is a huge, huge problem.
A lot of the time, it's not about eating more protein. It's about dialing back the fat and carbs, maybe a little bit more protein in grams, but, it's about dialing back the fat and carbs, which adds satiety and you get better satiety per calorie.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf! We want it now!
How vital is fiber and what's its role in satiety? What are the best sources? Did you want me to hit that one quickly, Calla?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I suppose from our analysis of satiety, protein and fiber have a positive effect on satiety, but protein's the one you can actually move a lot. Protein percentage is the one that people can actually get a lot more. They can go from 10 to 60% protein percentage and they get a lot more satiety. But fiber, just people, I suppose, in maybe we're getting a lot of low carbers and not the whole food plant-based peeps, but it just doesn't seem to be enough leverage to get a big effect. If all you're eating is whole food plant-based foods with no added refined flours or refined oils, that energy density and fiber content's absolutely going to smash you. How much asparagus and spinach can you eat? You'll just fade away overnight. But for people on the low carb end, they're probably not going to get as much effect from fiber as the protein. But definitely, as Ted said, stack as many green veggies, non-starchy veggies as you possibly can in there. Forget the fiber supplements, and yeah, if you chase nutrients though, you'll get the fiber you need.
Fiber has a pretty rigid ceiling. Like if you're eating more than about 70 grams a day, you are going to have some negative GI side effects.
Yep.
But you do want to have some. It's really a U-shaped curve with super steep edges. If you're eating absolutely none, you're leaving a lot of money on the table for satiety per calorie. But if you're trying to get 70 grams or 100 grams, you're going to die. I mean, you're just going to pray for death. It's not going to be good in your GI tract. So it's a really steep U-shaped curve, and you want to be at like, boom, 30 grams or 40 or 50. And it's easy to do if you're just eating whole foods. If you just make sure you eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, you're going to be totally awesome. But fiber's tricky.
Definitely not a goal necessarily for us. If you're chasing nutrients, you're getting plenty.
Right.
You're getting heaps. You're getting a ton. If you're chasing nutrient density through whole foods, including veggies, you're getting a massive amount of fiber. So we just say don't worry about fiber. It does people's head in because then they're supplementing fiber with all this other garbage. Don't do that.
We got another question here. How much protein can one eat at one time for being useful for muscle synthesis? Can body not make use of extra protein within the next 3 to 4 hours?
Yeah, I wonder if caveman hunted a woolly mammoth after 6 months of starving and said, "Oh, bro, no, we can't eat more than 30 grams of protein. We can't use it, dude. We'll just save it for later and we'll put it in the. We don't have a fucking fridge. It's sort of a ridiculous question a lot of the time. Just you can't overeat protein if it doesn't come with fat and carbs.
I like something I say often is, don't worry too much about too much protein, worry more so of too many calories. So and that goes a lot with what you were talking about, Marty. A lot of people just increase protein without considering what comes with it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there is a little bit of if you're a competitive bodybuilder and you're trying to eke out the absolute max hypertrophy you can, there is this sort of muscle full effect over about 30, 40, 50 grams where it's a little more useful to spread it out and eat, 40 grams 4 or 5 times a day. If you're taking anabolics and you're maxing out hypertrophy, you do want to divide it up. But like I would say for 99% of people, you could probably just put it all in one ginormous meal. And what you eat is, I'm going to say, orders of magnitude more important than when you eat it.
Another question here. Should protein technically be counted as 3 calories per gram as opposed to 4 due to its high thermic effect?
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I totally love that, and that's actually pretty much true. And in fact, I think that if you eat extra protein on top of your protein requirements and you're really tracking your calories, you could legit give it 3 calories per gram. I think that would actually be evidence-based and a reasonable supposition. I like that a lot.
Another one here. How many eggs can you eat without CVS bad effects in years to come? I had 10 eggs already today, so I hope I'm okay.
Damn. Yeah, I mean, like eating cholesterol doesn't seem to give you high cholesterol. So even the USDA took cholesterol off their list of dietary concerns. So I would say kind of go for it. I mean, I wouldn't eat more than 2 dozen a day because that's probably going to exceed your calories for most people. But I'm not super worried about it.
Regarding their better and worse are there better and worse proteins for satiety? I understand part of the satiety response is driven by amino acid. Clearly different proteins have different amino acid profiles. I would say that if you're getting it from whole food versus something like a protein supplement, you're going to find more satiating response from whole foods versus just downing a shake or having protein ice cream or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely the degree of pre-processing that's going to add to the satiety value of any protein versus one amino acid or the other. When we've done the analysis, you see a similar response across the board for all amino acids that tend to come together anyway. So
yeah, for me, it's about the incretin effect, definitely, because if you have a lot of mechanical weight and volume in your distal small intestine, you're going to stimulate a lot more GLP-1, and you're going to get a lot better incretin profile, and you're going to get a lot more satiety. And so eating a big steak and a big salad and having all this volume and weight in your lower small intestine, the GLP-1 will keep you full way longer than if you just drank away hydrolysate and it was just whoop gone immediately. Yeah. So definitely it's just like how unprocessed it is.
Yeah, another factor just to add to that is the bioavailability of that protein is really critical, just to make sure you're getting enough protein. If you're fond of a plant-based diet, you're going to need to eat more protein because not all the protein you're eating is going to be bioavailable. So you'll need to be more intentional. And if you're on a vegetarian or plant-based diet, the protein density per calorie and the bioavailability are lower, so you just need to be a lot more intentional about your protein.
So we have this last one here. Does any of these recommendations change for those of us who have an issue with malabsorption due to gastric bypass surgery?
Yeah, smaller, more frequent meals for sure. Unfortunately, you really can't eat very much at one time. So you have to eat a little bit and spread it out during the day. And that's no problem because, again, what you eat is more important than when you eat it. So you can eat tiny little bits of food all day long. And if it's the right food, it's not going to really matter. And that's totally okay. So that's what you have to do if you've had a gastric bypass or other volume limiting surgery. You're just basically going to have to eat same stuff, smaller, more frequent.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. I want to leave everyone off with something that's, fun, something that I love about the protein energy ratio, about nutrient density, and that's diet hacks. We all love them. Ted, Marty, and myself, or if anyone wants to step up, do you have any dieting hacks? What's something that you want to throw out there?
I have some like cheat code foods that I feel like are just a cheat code to weight loss. One of my cheat code foods is egg whites. Like, I know we've been bragging on egg whites, but the reality is it gives you a ridiculous weight and volume of food. So like, I'll make a scramble for breakfast with I'll saute some flavored vegetables, some mushrooms, some onions, some, something like that. And then I'll mix up like 2 eggs and a cup of egg whites. And I get this like freaking 2 pounds of food. It's just obscene, the weight and volume that I'm eating. And it's like 70 grams of protein at maybe 10 grams of carbs and 10 grams of fat. And the satiety per calorie is off the charts. And you're not hungry for the rest of your life. And I know it's not a whole food and everyone looks down on it, but that really is a cheat code. And there really is a reason why all of your bodybuilders and bikini models and fitness aesthetic people are eating this stuff, because it feels almost like an unfair advantage. It really does. Right. I know we're supposed to be all about the whole foods, but that is something I am using, and I am getting insanely high satiety per calorie out of it.
And if you wanted to add one whole egg yolk, you'd get all the nutrients you needed from the biotin and the B12 and the choline just from that one egg yolk. People go, oh, you've got to eat the whole eggs to get the nutrients you need. And it's like, no, you don't need all those nutrients.
And then I kind of do I'll do anything I can to increase the weight and the volume and the fiber and the satiety. And like for breakfast this morning, okay, I took 2 egg whites, put it in the stand mixer, whipped them into stiff peaks. Like, I whipped up the egg whites to get way more, volume out of it, put the egg yolks back in, dumped in a serving of a low carb and low fat Greek yogurt, like a low calorie Greek yogurt, dumped in a scoop of whey powder, dumped in some oat flour because you get fiber and you get the soluble oat fiber that like basically gives you this ridiculous satiety. Wow. And then I fried it up into pancakes. I felt like Kala because I was making these pancakes out of whipped egg whites, the yolks added back in, a low calorie Greek yogurt, oat flour, and a scoop of whey powder, vanilla whey powder. And I made like these amazing pancakes, and I just ate one of it. And that's all I've eaten all day long. Like it was only 200 calories, and I'm so full I can barely stand it. Like I'm literally out of my mind full. I don't know if I'll eat again. Like I'm so full. It's crazy. So I'm pulling every lever I've got with something like that.
Yeah, that's great. I just love finding the meals and foods that you enjoy, like lock them in, and you've always got that to go back to if you need it. We talk about the optimal 30-30 foods and meals that you just love, enjoy eating. You don't need that many meals that you love, and you can just rotate them. And even if you go off the rails, you can jump back in and find the ones you love. We've got this protein flan recipe, which is insanely satiating. I eat a lot of kangaroo, which is incredibly lean protein. And you've always got that as a go-to that you can just smash your appetite.
You just freaked out half the room by mentioning kangaroo being a diet hack.
but you order it in Canada. You eat it in Canada. It's insane.
Yes, it is a magical meat. A pound of it. You want a pound of meat. Pound of meat of it is less than 500 calories, 100 grams of protein. Unreal kangaroo. Wild meats, exotic meats, huge diet hack.
And the game meats are incredibly nutrient dense. So I found crocodile to eat one time, and it was incredibly satiating, but I looked at the nutrient profile of these game meats, and they're just off the chart. The nutrient density of the foods we were eating 1,000 years ago were amazing. We never had to worry about nutrient density because everything was just full of it. Now it's just through the floor because we're just producing in a really crap way, as we were talking about before, injected with fossil fuel fertilizers that just make everything grow quicker and faster and bigger and cheaper, but it's not good for us or the environment.
I want to just mention this. I feel like we have a lot of low carb advocates here in the room, and I come from a low carb diet, but I'm by far no longer a low carb eater. But I still love, again, having high volumes of food, and I don't want to restrict myself by having low carb meals all the time, all day. Moderate carb foods is a huge diet hack for me. Having an air fryer, amazing. So instead of having like 2 potatoes at breakfast, I'll have a potato and some carrots. Instead of having a very high sugary fruit salad, I'll have fruit like melons or berries, which are still pretty sweet, but the amount of sugar and calories is much lower than versus like dates or bananas or pineapple. So that's just something to consider. As Ted mentioned, the importance of tracking what you're eating, getting a knowledge and understanding of the nutrient profile that you're putting in your mouth. It's a superpower. That is a massive diet hack, regardless of your goals. Air fryer, more melons, and more carrots.
Yeah. I don't know if we want to handle one more question. Julie said, is Ted worried about the insulin spike from his egg whites and oat powder?
No, I'm not. I'm definitely not. That's a great question. Like, I want to spike my insulin when I eat protein. That's supposed to happen. That's totally fine. That's totally great. The carbohydrate insulin model is busted. I mean, it's basically wrong and has been disproven. And I'm not worried about insulin spikes from protein at all. Not at all. I'm worried about satiety per calorie. Yeah. Insulin spikes, not at all. Zero.
And totally, if you like, the biggest factor, like 85 to 90% of my wife's insulin dosage that I watch all day is her basal insulin, which is related to how big she is. And the amount of insulin your pancreas produces is just a factor of how much energy you've got to hold in storage. So trying to manage insulin by, managing the little blips after you eat is like trying to measure the volume of the ocean by looking at the waves on top. It's just ridiculously stupid. The way to manage insulin and insulin toxicity is to manage energy toxicity by maximizing satiety and nutrient density. So let's move on from that.
Yeah, just be thinner. Worry about your insulin area under the curve, which is just how freaking lean you are. Yeah. So that is literally the only thing you should be worried about.
Amen.
Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ted. Thanks, Marty. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. Let's have an amazing Saturday or Sunday, wherever you are. And yeah, wish you well.
Cheers. Thanks, Keller.
Cool. Thank you.